basically a pair of glasses, right? With a very small screen that sits just above your eye. And when you say, "Okay, glass," the glasses take voice commands for things like taking photos and video. It can also search keywords. It can send text messages. It can translate stuff. It sounds pretty cool. Let's bring in Jonathan Geller from BGR.com, what used to be called the Boy Genius website. Great to have you on the show today, Jonathan. It sounds cool. Is it going to be a game changer for Google?
I mean, look, this is something we're not going to really see for the next 2 to 3 years. It's a great concept. Google's great about getting their concepts out there. Then they refine them. Then they actually make them into products some of the time. Some of the times they go nowhere. But this is out there, Google, X Labs, secretive labs, where they're coming up with these self-driving cars, these wearable, computing devices. So it's interesting. I don't see it as a really big consumer product at this point at all whatsoever.
Do you agree with that, Gene? Is it maybe just a bit gimmicky?
Well, I think Jonathan's right. Over the next 2 years, 2 to 3 years, it's probably gimmicky. But I think that the direction of where consumer technology is going, wearable technology, is going to be a huge theme. And I think glasses and watches are going to be one of them. So I think that if you look at the next decade, it's a no-brainer. The next 3 years, it's hard to say.
I mean, yes and no. I think glasses are definitely harder than a watch, I'd say, publicly. You have this, now it's big, it has a battery, it's in your ear. It's much easier and more acceptably socially to wear a watch than glasses at this point. I think that's a hiccup for Google. They might have a watch, but I think at this point, I see it as a positive for Apple.
The space on a cell phone is a lot smaller than the space on a desktop screen. Google has got to find new ways to monetize search, right? Because there's just less real estate to sell. They got all kinds of cool stuff. In your estimation, Jonathan, what's going to be the next big thing? Monetizing Android?
Well, look, I mean, Android, they're doing what they're doing. It's doing well as far as an OS and as far as platform. But getting back to Google Glasses, what you said as far as advertising, I mean, look at what Google has now as far as the information they have access to. They know what you're searching, who you're emailing, where you are, where you're going, where you're getting directions. Now it's kind of scary that they're going to actually be able to have this LCD over your eye and know where you're at.
Are they going to sell what you're looking at? Honestly.
Honestly, it's entirely possible. But
Brian spent 8 minutes, staring at a Victoria's Secret window in the Short Hills Mall. I don't
and you might have an ad,
that.
2 miles away from there. But here's the crazy part. If you look at, not to bring this back to Apple, but if you look at Google and what their business is about, 90% of it's search and it's about advertising, everything like that. If you look at Apple, they're really hardware, software. They're not in it to monetize your information and sell it. And that, to me, is another barrier of getting Google so intertwined on your person.
Well, let's bottom line what this means for us, the shareholder of Google, Gene. I mean, you've got an overweight, I see, on the share price. Is there any danger it's going to fall prey to the same kind of thing that happened to Apple? Last September, it hit its record high, and then look at it stumble now. Is there any possibility Google will do the same? It hit a record high earlier this week.
Yeah, I mean, if we look at our price target on Apple relative to Google, there's not as much upside to Google, and I think that we're getting a lot closer to the upside. So I think you just got to be judicious in terms of taking profits when that's the right time. We're still overweight and still have room to go here, but we're getting closer, that's for sure.
Biggest risk to that share price?
I think that the stock is going to generally trend higher here. I think that the momentum that they've had over the past month has largely been driven by the pain that Apple's gone through. If half of Apple's investors would have bought Google, that would have accounted for the last 100-point move in Google. And so I think there's definitely, there's probably going to be a slowdown in the momentum of Google stock, despite the fact the chart looks really nice. It doesn't seem that there's going to have that big benefit that they've had over the last month.
Gene, Jonathan, thank you very much for coming and joining us.
Thank you.
All right, coming up next, the ultimate.
Basically a pair of